Have you ever been treated so unfairly by someone that you wished karma would find them? Well, I never expected my own son to be the one delivering that karma. When my neighbors refused to help me during the darkest time of my life, they had no idea my son would end up buying the house next door. But what he said to them after moving in changed everything. Stay until the end to see how this story of revenge turned into something much more powerful than I could have ever imagined. Welcome to Plot Twist Life, where I share real stories that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about human nature. Before I tell you what happened with my neighbors and how my son turned the tables, make sure to subscribe to this channel for more incredible life-changing stories that will teach you valuable lessons about family, revenge, and forgiveness. It all started 5 years ago when my husband of 32 years passed away unexpectedly. Mark had been the love of my life since high school, and losing him felt like losing half of myself. We had built our dream home together in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Connecticut, a beautiful colonial style house with a wraparound porch where we planned to grow old together, watching our grandchildren play in the yard. Those dreams were shattered when Mark suffered a massive heart attack while working in our garden one Sunday afternoon. The first few weeks after his funeral were a blur of tears and condolence, 'cause Dell's friends and family came and went. But as the weeks turned into months, the visits became less frequent. Soon, I was left alone in a house full of memories, struggling to keep myself together. Mark had always been the one who handled the maintenance around our home. He fixed leaky faucets, repaired broken steps, and kept our aging house from falling apart. Without him, I was lost. Our next-door neighbors, the Harrisons, had lived beside us for over 15 years. Robert and Linda Harrison were successful professionals. He was a corporate lawyer, and she was a hospital administrator. They had 2 college-aged children who rarely visited, and they kept mostly to themselves. We weren't close, but we had always been cordial, exchanging pleasantries across our shared fence, and sometimes bringing in each other's mail during vacations. That winter was particularly harsh. Connecticut winters can be brutal, but this one seemed determined to break me. A severe snowstorm hit our area in late January, dropping nearly 2 feet of snow overnight. I woke up to find my driveway completely buried, and worse, my heating system had failed. The temperature inside my house was dropping rapidly, and I had no idea what to do. I called several heating repair companies, but due to the storm, the earliest anyone could come was 3 days later. Desperate and shivering, I trudged through the snow to the Harrisons' house. Their driveway had already been cleared. They had a service that took care of it, and smoke was rising cheerfully from their chimney. I rang their doorbell, my teeth chattering uncontrollably. Robert answered the door, looking annoyed at the interruption. I explained my situation, asking if I could stay with them just until the heating company could come. What happened next still makes my chest tighten when I think about it. "I'm sorry, Elizabeth," Robert said, not looking sorry at all. "We're very busy with work this week, and we can't have guests. Have you tried calling a hotel?" I stood there, stunned. "The roads are barely passable," I stammered. "And I don't have anyone to clear my driveway now that Mark is gone." Linda appeared behind him, her face a mask of practiced sympathy. "It's such a shame about Mark," she said. "He was always so handy. Maybe you should consider selling that big house and moving somewhere more manageable for someone in your situation." Their words cut deeper than the cold. Someone in my situation, a 60-year-old widow who couldn't take care of herself. Before I could respond, Robert was already closing the door. "Perhaps try your son in Boston. I'm sure he'd be happy to help," he added, before the door clicked shut in my face. I trudged back through the snow, tears freezing on my cheeks. My son, David, lived 3 hours away in Boston with his wife and their 2 young children. He had offered to come stay with me after Mark died, but I had insisted I would be fine. I didn't want to burden him. Now, I had no choice but to call. David arrived 6 hours later, having battled treacherous road conditions to reach me. He was furious when he found me huddled under blankets in a house that had dropped to 45 degrees. After getting me settled in a hotel, he returned to clear my driveway, and managed to get an emergency heating repair scheduled for the next day. During his stay, I told him about the Harrisons' response to my plea for help. I didn't mean to complain, I was just hurt and needed to talk about it. But I could see something change in David's expression as I spoke. A quiet determination settled over his features, though he said nothing at the time. David stayed with me for a week, making sure the heating was fixed and that I had everything I needed before returning to Boston. Before he left, he suggested I take a class at the local community center to learn basic home maintenance. "Mom, you're stronger than you think," he told me. "Dad would want you to thrive, not just survive." Inspired by his faith in me, I signed up for the class. It wasn't easy. I was easily 20 years older than most of the other students, and I had never held a power tool in my life. But week by week, I learned how to fix a leaky faucet, how to patch drywall, and even how to troubleshoot basic heating issues. Each small victory gave me confidence, and slowly, I began to rebuild my life without Mark. I rarely saw the Harrisons during this time. When we did cross paths, they would smile and wave as if nothing had happened. I returned their greetings politely, but kept my distance. Their betrayal had taught me an important lesson about who I could count on, and I focused on building relationships with neighbors who had shown genuine kindness during my time of need. A year passed. Then too, I became involved in a widow's support group at my church, started volunteering at the local animal shelter, and even began dating again, something I never thought I would do after Mark. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good again. I had found my strength. Then, 3 years after that terrible winter, something unexpected happened. The Harrisons announced they were selling their house. Robert had received a promotion that required them to relocate to Chicago. The for sale sign went up, and within weeks, a sold sticker was slapped across it. I wondered who my new neighbors would be, hoping for someone friendly who wouldn't mind an independent widow next door. What I didn't know was that David had been watching the real estate listings in my neighborhood for months. When the Harrisons' house went on the market, he saw an opportunity. Without telling me, he and his wife, Sarah, made an offer on the house. They had been considering moving closer to me for some time, as Sarah had been offered a position at a hospital just 20 minutes away. The timing seemed perfect. The day the moving truck arrived, I was tending to my front garden. I watched curiously as a large moving van pulled into the driveway next door. And then, to my complete shock, I saw David step out of his car, followed by Sarah and my grandchildren. I dropped my gardening tools and ran to them, confusion and joy battling for supremacy. "David, what are you doing here?" His grin was wide and mischievous, like when he was a little boy planning a surprise. "Surprise, Mom. We bought the house. We're your new neighbors." I was speechless, tears welling in my eyes as my grandchildren, Emma and Jack, ages 8 and 6, tackled me with hugs. Sarah explained that she had accepted the hospital position, and they had decided it was time to be closer to family. Later that evening, after the children were asleep and the moving truck had departed, David and I sat on my porch swing, the same one where Mark and I had spent countless evenings. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. David took a sip of his coffee before answering. "I wanted it to be a surprise, and honestly, I wasn't sure we'd get the house. The market's competitive." I hesitated before asking the question that had been on my mind all day. "Did you buy this house because of what happened with the Harrisons?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Partly," he finally admitted. "When you told me how they treated you during that snowstorm, I couldn't stop thinking about it. It bothered me for years. Mom, they'd lived next to you for over a decade, and they couldn't offer you shelter for a few days during an emergency." I nodded, the memory still painful despite the time that had passed. "But it's not just about them," David continued. "It's about you. After Dad died, I worried about you being alone. Sarah and I had been talking about moving closer even before the Harrisons decided to sell. This just seemed like, I don't know, karma or something. Did you ever say anything to them?" I asked, curious if there had been a confrontation I wasn't aware of. David smiled, a mix of satisfaction and something else, something wiser crossing his face. I did, actually. The day we closed on the house, I ran into Robert at the real estate office. He recognized me from the few times we'd met over the years, and he seemed surprised to see me there. What did you say to him? I asked, both dreading and eager to hear the answer. I told him I was buying his house, David said. He seemed confused at first, then asked if you had decided to move after all, and if I was helping with the purchase. David's expression grew serious. I looked him straight in the eye and said, "No, my mother is doing great in her home. She learned how to take care of herself after my dad died. Despite having neighbors who couldn't be bothered to help her during the worst time of her life. I'm moving in next door because that's what family does. We show up for each other." I gasped softly, imagining Robert's face. He had the decency to look ashamed. David continued. He started making excuses. They were under a lot of pressure at work. They had important meetings they couldn't miss. They didn't realize how serious the situation was. "And what did you say to that?" I asked. David's eyes met mine, and I saw mark in them the same quiet strength, the same unwavering moral compass. I told him, "I'm not moving next door to my mother for revenge, Mr. Harrison. I'm doing it because I've learned that life is too short to prioritize the wrong things. My father's death taught me that. I hope your move to Chicago gives you the chance to figure out what really matters before it's too late." Tears filled my eyes as David spoke. This wasn't the vengeful scenario I might have imagined. It was something far more powerful, a lesson delivered with wisdom rather than anger. "You know," David said, putting his arm around me, "in a strange way, I should thank the Harrisons. Their actions that day showed me exactly what kind of person I never want to be. They reminded me of what Dad always used to say, that we measure our worth by how we treat others in their time of need." I finished for him, quoting Mark's favorite saying. "Exactly," David nodded. So while part of me did want to make them uncomfortable by buying their house, the bigger part just wanted to be close to you. To be the kind of son Dad would be proud of. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity as David and his family settled into their new home. The house that had once represented rejection and isolation now echoed with the laughter of my grandchildren. Emma and Jack raced between our yards as if the property line didn't exist. And Sarah and I established a routine of morning coffee on my porch. My life transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. I taught Emma how to garden, using the skills Mark had once taught me. Jack followed me around with his toy tools, eager to help with the home maintenance tasks I had mastered. And in the evenings, we often gathered for family dinners, the kind I had feared were behind me when Mark died. One day, about a month after they moved in, I was helping Sarah plant flowers in their front yard when a car pulled up to the curb. Linda Harrison stepped out, looking uncertain. She had flown back to Connecticut to handle some paperwork related to their move, she explained. She had forgotten some personal items in the attic and wondered if she could retrieve them. Sarah invited her in politely, and I returned to my gardening, unsure how to interact with this woman who had once shut her door in my face. A few minutes later, Linda emerged from the house and paused by the garden where I knelt. "Your grandchildren are beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you," I replied, standing to face her. The awkwardness between us was palpable. "Elizabeth," she began, her voice faltering slightly. "Robert told me about his conversation with your son. I want you to know that I've thought about that snowstorm many times over the years. What I did was wrong." I studied her face, searching for sincerity and finding it mixed with regret. "We were so caught up in our careers, in appearances," she continued. "We had these important clients coming to our home office that week, and I was worried about having a guest, about the disruption." She shook her head. "It sounds so trivial now, so selfish. I'm sorry." The apology I had once craved now felt almost unnecessary. I had moved beyond needing their validation or approval, but I recognized the courage it took for her to come back and face me. "Thank you for saying that, Linda," I said simply. "I hope Chicago is treating you well." "It's fine," she said, her expression revealing more than her words. "The truth is, we don't really know anyone there. Our neighbors keep to themselves. It's been lonely." She glanced at David's house, where the sounds of children playing could be heard from the backyard. You're very fortunate to have your family so close. In that moment, I saw Linda Harrison clearly, for perhaps the first time, a successful woman who had prioritized career and status over connections, who was now facing her later years with wealth but without community. The revenge fantasy I might have harbored years ago dissolved completely, replaced by something unexpected: compassion. Building relationships takes time and effort, I said gently. But it's never too late to start. Linda nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. Your son said something similar to Robert, about figuring out what matters before it's too late. She hesitated, then added, he seems like a wonderful man. You raised him well. His father and I did our best, I said, feeling a surge of pride. Mark always taught him that family comes first. After Linda left, I sat on my porch swing, reflecting on how completely my life had changed in 5 years. I had lost my husband, faced rejection from people I thought I could count on, learned to stand on my own 2 feet, and now found myself surrounded by family in a way I never expected. The house next door, once a symbol of my isolation, had become an extension of my home, a place of connection rather than division. That evening, as we gathered for dinner in David's backyard, I looked around at the faces of my family: my son, who had defended my honor with wisdom rather than anger; my daughter-in-law, who had rearranged her career to be closer to me; my grandchildren, who were growing up knowing the value of showing up for family. And I knew that Mark would be proud of all of us. David caught me watching them and raised his glass. To Mom, he said, who taught me more about strength in these past 5 years than I learned in my entire life before. As glasses clinked around the table, I realized that the true revenge against coldness and selfishness isn't more of the same. It's living a life rich with the warmth of family, community, and purpose. My son hadn't bought the house next door to spite the Harrisons. He had bought it to create something beautiful from something painful, a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my days. The next morning, I received an email from Linda. She and Robert had decided to join a neighborhood association in Chicago, their first step toward building connections in their new community. Your story inspired us, she wrote. It's never too late to change, right? I smiled as I typed my reply. Never too late. Good neighbors make all the difference. And as I pressed send, I looked out my window at my son's house next door, where he was teaching Jack how to ride a bike in the driveway. The very driveway Robert Harrison had once kept meticulously clear of snow while I shivered alone. Life has a way of coming full circle, I thought. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all, it's living well, surrounded by love. And that's how my son's decision to buy the house next door taught all of us, including our former neighbors, about what truly matters in life. Sometimes the most powerful response to being treated poorly isn't getting even, but creating something beautiful instead. I hope this story reminds you to prioritize the relationships in your life, and to be the kind of neighbor you'd want to have. If this story touched you or made you think about your own relationships, please hit that subscribe button to join our Plot Twist Life community. We share stories every week that will surprise you, move you, and maybe even change how you see the world. Leave a comment below telling me about a time when someone's kindness or lack thereof changed your perspective on life. Until next time, remember that the best plot twists in life are the ones we create ourselves by choosing compassion over revenge.